For those of you who don't know me, I'm Danny Nierenberg. I am co-founder and president with Bernard Pollock of Food Tank. Oh, thank you. We paid you to do that. For those of you who don't know me, Food Tank is a research and advocacy organization. We're really devoted to telling stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems around the globe. And we do this with the aim to inspire, motivate, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food. And I'm really thrilled and honored to be collaborating with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I want to thank Dan Rochelle, Rebecca Riley, Madeline Keating, and Yvette Cabrera for their partnership. Today's agenda is really awesome, and it couldn't have been possible without them. Please give them a round of applause. And again, WNYC, this space is incredible. I want to thank Ryan Wild and Ricardo Fernandez, James Cronway. They are awesome. They just make this all look good. They make me sound good. I'm just thrilled to be working with them. Round of applause. We also want to thank the team at Great Performances who provided the delicious lunch that you just had, especially Liz Newmark, Janelle Cruikshank, and Lauren Traeger. They put together a really delicious menu with so many sustainable and wonderful ingredients. So we're going to dive in just a minute. I want to get a few pieces of housekeeping out of the way. What you'll hear today is really fast-paced and dynamic discussions, and we do that because we want to hear it from as many experts as possible. We also want to make a great experience for the live stream audience. So if you need a break, just step out, get water, do whatever you need to do. If I need to cut people off, please understand, forgive me later, but I just want to keep the conversations flowing and make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. I hope that everyone will share the conversation, make suggestions or critiques using the hashtag ClimateWeekNYC. We'll be checking it and interacting with you. If you have concerns that you want to email to me directly, it's just very easy at Danielle@foodtank.com. And my phone is right over there next to Bernie, my co-founder, and I'll be checking it regularly. We're here today to talk about 3 important issues. 1, building healthy soils. 2, reducing food waste. And 3, protecting pollinators from pesticides. These are all so important. It's also crucial right now. Healthy soils and pollinators are the foundation for resilient food and agriculture systems that support our planet's health and the health of all of us. We really have to protect them both. And we also have to make sure that the beautiful, delicious, nourishing food farmers and farm workers produce doesn't go to waste. Today, roughly 1/3 of all food goes to waste. And this is happening while millions of people, about 730 million people are hungry. Food waste is a humanitarian crisis, it's an environmental crisis, and for me, it's a moral crisis. But thankfully, it's one that we can solve. It's been so exciting for me personally to see so many organizations like NRDC focusing more on soils, on food waste, and the role of pollinators. And also we're seeing a lot of action from research institutions, from governments and farmers organizations around the globe on these issues. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the experts that we brought together today because all of them are really so great. They're great speakers, they're great academics, they're great writers, they're great advocates for all of these things. I want to take this moment to thank NRDC for taking the lead on these issues when so many other environmental organizations are not talking about food and agriculture in the same way. So please give NRDC a round of applause. They really deserve it. I'm in awe of them. And I'm really excited to kick off this afternoon with somebody I have admired for a long time, and that's Rebecca Riley. She is the Managing Director of Food and Agriculture and Nature with NRDC. Huge round of applause for Rebecca, please. So what I want to ask you is why these themes this week during Climate Week?
So agriculture, as you said, is an issue that is so fundamental to our economy, to rural economies. It creates the food that we eat. It's just a really basic part of our world. And yet it has this huge outsized impact on all the things we care about at NRDC, on climate change, on biodiversity, on human health. And as you mentioned, for far too long, environmental organizations just haven't given it the focus that it deserves. But that's really starting to change, and it's changing at NRDC. This is actually a new role for me. I've worked for a long time on endangered species, on clean water, on lots of issues across the spectrum. But food and ag is something that we have newly decided to elevate because we've realized how important it is and how overlooked it has been. And so when you look at climate change, for example, and you talk about food waste, when food is wasted, it goes to the landfill, and that creates methane emissions. And for those of you who know a lot about climate, methane emissions are really, really bad. But you're also wasting every input on the way. So you're wasting fertilizer, you're wasting pesticides, you're wasting water, the fuel. And so it has this outsized impact on climate that we just don't think about.
Yeah.
And so the same thing is true of soil health. One of the things we're really starting to focus on is nitrogen, because that is a source of nitrous oxide emissions, which, again, we talk about climate, people think about CO2, but nitrous oxide is 300 times more powerful greenhouse gas. And 75% of the nitrous oxide in this country comes from agricultural emissions. And it's something we're just not paying enough attention to. And so we're starting to elevate this into the conversation. And the same thing is true of the pollinator issue. 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat depends on bees for pollination. But they're dying at really high rates because we're poisoning the ecosystem with a class of pesticides, insecticides called neonicotinoids. And we're using them in a way that isn't helping farmers. And so really our goal at NRDC is to tackle these issues, but to tackle them in a way that is smart and ensures we can still grow the food we need to feed our country and feed the world.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of that. Such important information. So important that you're focusing on nitrous oxide and methane because they get left out of these conversations, as you pointed out. So important. I also think, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how food and agriculture have really become a part of the climate conversation over the last 4 years. Do you feel encouraged by that? Or do you feel like maybe it's a sort of using food and ag as a scapegoat? I like to think of food and ag as the solution, but a lot of it's easier to blame farmers often.
Of course. So food and ag can be a solution, but it's not a solution yet. I do think there are really good signs, though. This past year when they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which those of you who follow Congress a lot know that the IRA was the most important and biggest investment in climate change, in reducing climate change, our country has ever made. And it turns out agriculture was a huge part of that investment. The IRA put $20 billion towards climate-smart agricultural practices. And that's just not the kind of thing we were talking about 5-10 years ago. So I do think there's increasing recognition, but it's definitely not enough, and we're not there yet, and so there's a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work to do. I'm glad you and so many others are doing it. I'm wondering if you can share with the audience what you're most excited about hearing about today.
So we have such an incredible group of people here today. We've brought together scientists, public officials, my team at NRDC, who's going to tell you all about the way we're tackling some of these problems. But what I'm most excited about is to really have the engagement with all of you, because you're all here because these are issues you care about. And so I hope that you can take the time to really listen to what we're talking about, think about it, and think about what it is you can do in your role and in your life to engage on this work too.
It's so exciting. This is a really stellar lineup. NRDC has pulled together so many great people, and I'm really excited to hear from them. Rebecca, I think a lot about this idea of hopeful urgency, and I wonder if you feel optimistic. I think all of us who work on environmental and agricultural issues sometimes get stuck in the doom and gloom. How do you sort of break through that?
I think thinking about this in a solutions-oriented way is really the way forward. And we have to find solutions for the sake of farmers as well as the sake of ourselves, because climate change poses a huge risk to our system of agriculture. it increases flooding, it increases drought, it increases pest pressures. And as we've reduced the health of our soil, we have overused pesticides. At the end of the day, we are driving towards an incredibly unsustainable way to grow food. But we can flip that around, and that's a win-win sort of solution. And so thinking about it in terms of these kinds of win-win solutions is the thing that still gives me hope.
Yeah, it makes you get up in the morning. I can tell from talking to you. I love that NRDC really makes this farmer-centered and people-centered. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's important?
So at the end of the day, so first of all, I should say I am from a very rural community in Illinois. So
Hello, Monmouth.
Where Danny went to college. And my dad was a John Deere dealer. It was a very agricultural-based economy. And so I know from personal experience how important agriculture and farmers and our system of agriculture is to rural economies and to our country. And so really centering that is very important to me personally. But I also think it's the way forward. We can't throw farmers under the bus here. We have to find solutions that solve the problems, but solve them in a farmer-friendly way.
Absolutely. And Monmouth is such a great place to grow up in. It was a great place to go to school. I just want to thank Dr. Steve Boobin and Rebecca's mom for watching today, because I know they're out there. Rebecca, do you have a call to action to the audience?
So I think every single one of you sitting here today has a role to play, whether you are an advocate, one of our incredible partners that we work with, whether you're a funder, you're a reporter, or you're a supporter. You play a really critical role in advancing this conversation. And as we've been talking about, food and agriculture, it's so important, but we haven't quite gotten it to the center of the climate conversation, the way that fossil fuels and electric cars and all of these other issues are. And so you have a role to play to help us do that, and I'm really excited about that potential.
I am too. We all have a role to play in this. Thank you for your leadership, Rebecca. What an honor to work with you.
Thank you.
Please give her a round of applause. You can stay right there. So I think that was a perfect way to open up this afternoon, and we have a lot of really great conversations to get into. Thank you again, Rebecca.